Welcome to a bonus episode of Compass Points, brought to you by CompassKnox.com. Please like and subscribe on your favorite podcast provider and tell your friends about us.
Okay, joining us this week to talk about planning issues and other important things is our guest, Kevin Murphy, who is a longtime advocate for planning and rural preservation, particularly in East Knox County, where he has a long family history, which we'll touch on. Kevin, thanks for joining us.
Thank you, Jesse and Scott, for having me this morning. I really am looking forward to this conversation.
So you are a co-founder of the Knox County Planning Alliance, which I'm going to ask you about in just a second. But also at this week's County Commission meeting, you were actually honored, or I guess your family's farm was honored by commission. That's Murphy Springs Farm, which I think goes back to the 1700s. Is that right? Can you tell us about that?
Yeah, my great grandparents, Robert and Martha Murphy, migrated from Southwest Virginia into Knox County, and we don't have any records that tell us anything before their very first deed of property on the farm. And that was May 24th, 1797. They bought 110 acres from William Anderson, who's the father of Isaac Anderson, founder of Maryville College. They bought it from John Crawford. He was actually one of the Knox County delegates to the Tennessee Constitutional Convention of 1796. So just about a year after Tennessee achieved statehood. And we've been here. The family's been on the farm since 1797. One of their sons built a house around 1835 to 1840, and that's the house that I'm doing this interview from today.
Wow, that's great. And County Commission was there a special designation that they were giving to the farm?
It was really just an honor that it has been here 225 years. It is the third oldest farm in the county. The other two oldest farms are the McBee Farm, which is out farther on Washington Pike, settled in 1785, and the Strong Stock Farm, which I believe was settled around 1791. Both of those are in east/northeast Knox County. And ask Commissioner Beeler if he wanted to take a minute just to recognize the long history of some of the farms and families in the county, and he decided to do so. I think we have a Century Farm designation. I believe there's now 13, maybe 14 farms in the county that are designated Century Farms by the Department of Agriculture, and that's a designation to simply say that a family's been farming there for at least 100 years. So it's a nice documentation and recognition that of what some of the old farms are, the older families in the state, and really it, I think, serves as kind of a touchstone to remind us of our agricultural heritage that still continues today.
And very relevant to what we're talking about today, because a lot of what we talk about when we talk about planning and development in Knox County, especially outside the city, is this sort of ongoing conversion of a lot of our traditional agricultural property into residential or commercial development. So tell us about the Knox County Planning Alliance. This was something that you and some other sort of community and preservation advocates across the county put together a couple of years ago.
Yep, it started at a county commission meeting. There were individuals from the Hardin Valley area, the South Knox area, the Northeast Knox area, and East Knox County there for different issues. And we heard each other get up and speak. And in the back of the commission room, we started just talking, and we said, oh, we're all from different parts of the county, but we have very similar concerns and issues and challenges that we're dealing with. So we formed informally. We have an informal board of advisors, and we had, I don't know if it was a vote, but they asked me to be the chair of it. So I'm one of I'm the primary chair of the group, and really we're a coalition of some involved citizens, and some of the citizens represent community groups, and we advocate for improved and effective planning in the county, particularly around the growth concerns. And the main things that KCPA is looking for is really to make our planning processes thoughtful. We want them to be simpler for everybody to understand, and we think that benefits applicants, developers, neighborhoods, engineers. Simpler regulation that's a little bit more clear cut and prescriptive. And one of the main things that we are also that we look at is we really want to understand the cumulative impact of development. So not just case by case, but what does the 20 cases or 30 cases, in that area, what does that actually do? So that's a lot of our of why we formed.
We should probably mention that one of your fellow co-founders, Kim Frazier, is currently a candidate for county commission in the 11th district. She won the Republican primary there. I won't ask you who you're supporting in that race, but I know that she is talking about a lot of these same issues in her campaign for commission. And I know that one of the issues that you all are very engaged with now is the advanced Knox process, which is an update of the county's comprehensive planning. Can you talk about that a little bit? Where it's at, what are the opportunities for public involvement and input?
Yep. So advanced Knox is, and it relates to unincorporated Knox County. There's all counties and municipalities in the state are supposed to have a comprehensive land use plan. And today, the city and county share one, the Knox County General Plan, which was finalized in 2003. And that contains a lot of sector plans underneath it. But at the highest level of that general plan, it hasn't been updated since 2003. It has sector plans and park plans and hillside ridgetop plan and all sorts of subcomponents. But the main vision hasn't been updated in now 19 years. And that's getting really long in the tooth. It was supposed to be I think a 30-year plan. But yeah, so at the high level plan, that's what sets the high level policies for growth and development in the county, and that really needed to be looked at. So after it's taken a little bit of time, but the county has started this effort called Advanced Knox to really build a new plan, and that's going to cover just the unincorporated area of Knox County. The plan will address things like development policies, where we should grow, what we should try and preserve, how we should grow. Are we looking at mixed use? What are the values that we have as Knox County, and try and pull all that into the plan. So Advanced Knox started. Its planning staff and county staff are they're the steering committee that are doing a great job of setting everything up. They brought in several outside consulting firms that are doing a lot of the heavy lift work of gathering information, reviewing it, looking. One of the things that we are benefiting from is these outside consultants are looking at a lot of other communities and counties in the region, and I think nationally. So they've got a lot of experience in, and they can tell us some things of what is working well and not working well, which so that gets us some great outside input into this process. Today, Advanced Knox they've completed their first round of public engagement. That was a listening round. So I believe the consultants at this point they've reviewed all the plans, all the zoning ordinances, all the regulations around land use, and they came up with some really great workshops back in March and April, asking communities and citizens to come in and tell them what makes Knox County special. What are some opportunities for development and growth? What do you think are not being met in terms of needs? What are some opportunities around transportation? All sorts of really good questions. So I believe at this point they're now taking all of that, consolidating it, mapping it out to they had maps of these workshops, which were great. And you would pinpoint, this is an area that I think, is special to Knox County. This is a park, or this, river area or something like that. So they're putting all that on a map, which is just going to be so helpful. The next round, and there's 3 rounds of kind of public involvement. The second round, which we'll be entering later this summer, I believe, is the making choices round. They're going to present several scenarios based off of all the feedback that they've got, and kind of show, I hope graphically or visually, what those scenarios look like. So as an example, they may say, well, here's what Knox County would look like in 10, 15, 20 years if we continued with your current zoning ordinances and plans and stuff like that. And maybe they'll show us how, what it looks like on a map and density. I'm hoping they'll address things like what transportation and congestion issues there might be. And I think, so they're going to give us several scenarios, and I believe during that round they'll ask the public to say, well, what of these scenarios kind of looks right? And then the final round is what they call confirming choices, which I believe is they're going to flesh out the final scenario a lot deeper and ask us, well, is this what you're looking for? Have we got this right? I think that's really the detailed comments feedback round. So I believe the process is 18 to 24 months. A big part of Advanced Knox is its land use planning and a transportation plan, which that's something that we haven't really had in the county for a long time, a comprehensive transportation plan as well. So they'll look at all the infrastructure, all the roads and sidewalks, bicycle lanes, things like that, and try and put a list of here's where your needs are. And I'm hoping there's estimated cost in there so we can get a good idea of what infrastructure is urgently needed now and in the next 10, 15 years based off anticipated growth. And the final sidecar is they've also slotted in putting a new or an updated parks and recreation plan together for the county. And that's really exciting because our parks, I think we've learned over the last 2 years, we like it a lot. We like being outdoors, and I think they're with the development, especially then the growth that we're seeing, the parks are more strained, and there's a need to probably create more parks because we simply have more people living in areas where people weren't living before.
And people can follow all of this, I think, at advancedknox.org, right? The website for the project, and there will be, announcements of upcoming meetings and so forth.
Yep, and they've, I believe, last time I went out on the website, they've collected all the responses and maps and everything from that first round, so you can go see all this comments and feedback. It's great.
Kevin, why doesn't the Advanced Knox include the city of Knoxville? You said it's only an unincorporated Knox County. Why not? Because they're so interdependent on one another, and especially with transportation, one of the issues that comes up in the city, which I cover city government, is trying to make it so that people can who live in the city but work in the county where jobs may be, getting to and from those places. Why wasn't the city included in that?
Yep. Great question. First of all, both the city of Knoxville and the town of Farragut are, I believe they're in a key stakeholder role as well in the county process. I know that county staff I've talked to, they are engaging very directly with the city and Farragut on especially the transportation issues, because that's where most of the interface is between things. The city about 3 to 5 years ago, they went through a process of updating their zoning ordinance. That was the Recode Knoxville project. And we've got two levels of land use regulations. The first one is the top level is the plans, which are the development policies, the vision, kind of the need statements. The zoning ordinance is the actual laws and prescriptive regulations that you have to follow that regulate the uses that can occur on a piece of property, the setbacks, how far things have to be from lot lines, form, shape, all sorts of stuff. The city kind of said several years ago that in terms of the land use plan, it was good enough, and the city is generally developed out within the city limits. Not completely, but generally developed out. And most of what the city is actually doing is redevelopment. So it's either updating, making things bigger, changing shape. Maybe it's a tear down redevelopment. So the city said what they really need to focus on was their zoning ordinance, that list of those prescriptive regulations. And they said that at the plan level, the plan was probably good enough, but their zoning ordinance, that's where they're having the most conflicts. Knox County has got all this undeveloped land, and it really needed to take a plan that was just comprehensive for the county in general. And so that's what, and the county does need to update the zoning ordinance, and Advanced Knox is at the end supposed to come up with some recommendations and strategies for updating the zoning ordinance. And it's widely recognized that a zoning ordinance update is the follow-on project after the comprehensive plan is adopted. So we're looking forward to that zoning ordinance update as well. But the city had already updated the zoning ordinance, and I believe the consensus was, that the city didn't need necessarily its own updated general plan, but the county was desperately in need of one.
So pivoting a little bit from the general to the more specific, in this past week's county commission meeting, there were a couple of issues that came up that sort of illustrated a lot of this. One of those is this proposal to change, and I don't want to get too far into the weeds here because it's a little complicated, but to change an appeals process currently for uses on review, which are basically uses that are allowed on a certain piece of property, but have to be approved specifically by the Planning Commission. People who are unhappy with an approval of a given project can currently appeal that decision to the county's Board of Zoning Appeals, which I believe you used to sit on yourself.
Yeah, for about 9 years. Yep.
Yeah, and now under this proposal, which they're just asking the Planning Commission to review it and make recommendations about it, but it would potentially change it so that those appeals could only go straight to Chancery Court if you didn't like what the Planning Commission did. And I know this is something KCPA has raised concerns about. Can you just kind of talk through what those concerns are?
Yeah, so uses on review those are the cases that really are asked to take more scrutiny. There are uses that there's two broad categories. One is a use that might be more intensive. I believe there's landfill and mining, or that's kind of the most intensive ones. But there's even uses in the office zone, neighborhood commercial. If you want to put in a convenience store that's got gas pumps in it, that's a use on review because that's more intensive than maybe putting in a restaurant, although restaurants may be used on review as well. So there's a number of uses that they just say, if you want to do that, you need to come forward with a plan to show us kind of what the site's going to look like, where the buildings are going to be, potentially your landscaping, your lighting, and it gives an opportunity to say, well, are there some adverse impacts? Are there ways to mitigate the adverse impacts? Is this compatible or not? But it is a judgment call by the Planning Commission. Planning staff does a lot of analysis, and they make an initial recommendation, and then the Planning Commission looks at it. The challenges that we face are in the planning meeting process. A preliminary agenda comes out about 3 weeks beforehand. It just tells you that an item is on the agenda, and you have to go chase down the information for the next couple of weeks until the Friday before the Planning Commission meeting. They publish the final agenda, which has all of the staff recommendations. And what neighborhoods and sometimes even applicants find is there's a whole lot of work to do between that Friday and the Planning Commission meeting on the following Thursday. And that's just a short amount of time to digest the recommendations, really understand what the final plan is, and assess the impacts. And in that time, we're also asked to work with the applicants and see, can you meet with them? Can we make things happen? And I'll point out Saturday and Sunday are weekend days, so there's really very little working time between when the staff recommendations come out and everybody has that full picture, and then when the Planning Commission meets. So, and take a use on review is often the most complicated type of a hearing. It's the one where there's a full development plan and there's lots of things to analyze. So, in consequence, today the use on review can be appealed to the Board of Zoning Appeals. And what we found, and even looking back through the data, that often, in a number of cases, I think about 35 or 40%, the board has made a modification to the use on review appeal. Basically, that additional time, about 45 days after the Planning Commission till the BZA hears it, gives people time to take a deeper look do a little bit more research, potentially work with the applicant. And we hope they are working with the applicant to try and come up with that. And then the BZA has a longer hearing process. They allow each side more time to speak, and they usually take more time to dive into the issue. And at that point, you've probably got it down to a crucible of here's what's really important. So we think KCPA thinks that deeper dive and having a bit more time gives all parties chance for the opportunity to come out with a better outcome. The next step after BZA is to appeal to Chancery Court, and the proposal that's on the table right now is just to send the appeal up to Chancery Court.
And it seems like the concern is that the effect of that would be to discourage people, community groups, residents, and so forth from even filing an appeal, because it costs $200 to appeal to the BZA. It costs a bit more than that just to file something with Chancery Court. But of course, we all know that going to court, hiring a lawyer and all of that is a longer and more expensive process, right?
There's a couple of things that we really point out. One, you're absolutely right. It's a longer process to go to Chancery Court, and likely at that point, sides are entrenched enough where they take it to courts of appeals. I think in the last 15 years, there's been some cases that have been appealed, and the ones that have made it through have, I believe, gone through courts of appeals. So it's dragged on for more than a year. BZA, on the other hand, within, sometimes it's postponed once or twice, but it usually wraps up within 90 days at the most for the appeals process. I do want to say that the lawyer argument I actually find kind of moot when parties would come to the BZA when I was sitting in it. At least one, if not both of the parties, usually had decided to hire representation because they said this, is a big, they care enough about the appeal and they decided that it took representation. So, but the representation still at BZA, I think, is going to be less costly than going through court. I don't know for sure. The final thing, though, is the breadth of authority for the review. The Board of Zoning Appeals can reviews a case de novo, and they have the authority to reweigh all of the evidence and come to their own conclusion based off of how they hear the evidence. When it goes to court, that's a writ of certiorari, I believe, and that's that at that point the court is looking to see was there an arbitrary or a capricious decision? Did they have facts to support the conclusion that they reached? Did they do something completely illegal or against the regulations? So the appeal to court is a much narrower lens that they're allowed to look through, which, as an example, they can't do as much. I remember one of the first appeals that came in front of us when I was on the BCA was there's a convenience store. No, there was apartments, and they had gone through use on review, and there's a requirement to put sidewalks in a particular area. And when they looked at the engineering and stuff, that wasn't the best place to put sidewalks. There was some topography and some challenges and all that. So the applicant appealed that to the Board of Zoning Appeals, and we weighed the evidence, and we heard from the engineer, for the developer, and we heard from Knox County Engineering, and determined to make a modification to the sidewalk condition that gave them a few options. And that was a win for them. I think they did have representation, but they were able to resolve that within a couple of months. They didn't have to refile their use on appeals, and they were able to get, it was a better result for everybody. So there are some instances where this case, where the existing process works really well. There are also some instances where you just know it's going to go to court anyways, and maybe that is, the BZA is, one step in that process. But that's our opinion, is that BZA actually, with their wider ability to review and modify decisions, has, and to take a longer, deeper look at stuff, we think that adds a lot of value.
Well, I know this is going to come up at Planning Commission in the coming month, and then potentially back to County Commission. So certainly we will be tracking it. And real quick, before we let you go, I also wanted to touch on another issue that came to Commission this past week, which was this very contentious rezoning in South Knox County and the Dry Hollow community, where Commission ultimately ended up approving the development although they changed the density allowance to a certain degree, only allowing, I say only, 180 still sounds like a lot of houses, but allowing 180 houses on one area of the property where before there could have been up to 255. Just, I guess, your thoughts on that process. This was sort of a classic illustration of this, where the community does get engaged. There was a lot of community involvement, a lot of community members at the meeting waving red signs saying no rezone. And it still went through, although with some modifications. I guess, what does that whole case illustrate to you?
So that case, I think, was an embodiment of the tension that exists in the more rural, undeveloped areas of the county. And that's the core issue that we hope that Advanced Knox will help us address from a visioning standpoint, as well as understanding the really the infrastructure needs and the need to follow the plans in the process. So the community out there, they were looking at an area. There are a couple of key things. First, this was there's over half of the proposed development was just steep mountainside that shouldn't be developed on. So there's kind of the question of, well, if I own steep mountainside, can I take some, maybe some potential developable density and move that to another area? That's called clustering. That was a key issue. But the community out there was fairly sparsely populated. I think they drew a map and said, it was almost with, you take everything within a mile, the people that live there, and that equals the number of houses that they want to put in this, 64, some odd acres.
Basically doubling the population of that area.
Yeah. So they're concerned about roads. They don't have the access to Chapman Highway has been improved, but it's not a stoplight, and it's still, I will say, a little exciting is the word I would use, trying to get for Sevierville Pike onto Chapman Highway in that area. And the community looked through the engineering documents, and those improvements were made for safety reasons, not for increased capacity. So what you find is Knox County has a lot of undeveloped area with more narrow roads, not a lot of services in terms of parks, emergency services, fire and ambulance in the area, and potentially, the schools need, are a little bit older, so they might need some investment and some refurbishment as well. But that one really is it's a very different type of development, look and feel and change that the rural county is seeing. So I think Dry Hollow, epitomizes that. One thing that I think in Dry Hollow didn't work very well is that was one where the applicant didn't do much direct engagement with the community, and that's a really important thing. Things work much better when applicants and community can talk with each other. But I don't think that one happened as much in the Dry Hollow case. So that's really unfortunate, because there's opportunities to come up with win-win. And our experience is that community members, there are some that, are not, are just, going to be against development, but there are others that are going to contribute ideas to make it better and have some really good, and might have some good suggestions. So I think there was some opportunity to do some win-win that we may not have seen there.
That is something I feel like I see a lot, and county commissioners and city council members, both when an issue is before the city, put a lot of emphasis. They like to see developers engage with the community. And at this point, I'm always a little bit surprised when a developer shows up, and it seems like that hasn't happened, because it does seem like that's become more of an expectation, right?
It is. I will say, in a lot of cases, it's the community reaching out to the developer after the sign goes up. But at least, that conversation is happening. The community members certainly would really love it if the developers would reach out proactively. I will say, in our position as a planning alliance, maybe only a couple, less than 3 times has a developer reached out and said, do you know of somebody and people in this area that we can get in contact with? I know that sometimes there's established neighborhoods, but we'd love to see applicants proactively reach out to community, the local neighbors and communities.
All right. Well, lots to talk about here, and I'm sure we'll probably be circling back with you in the future, especially as Advanced Knox advances, to talk more about that. So thanks very much, and enjoy your Memorial Day.
Yeah. Scott, Jesse, thank you for this opportunity to have a conversation with you. We really appreciate it.
Thank you for listening to this bonus episode of Compass Points. Please like, subscribe, and share. And don't forget, for more in-depth coverage, go to CompassKnox.com and subscribe today. This episode is recorded by Lord Seth A. Barber at Barbarian Studios, Knoxville, Tennessee.